Okay, if you guys could open your Bibles, the book of Leviticus, chapter 25. Chapter 25. Just an announcement really quickly, let you guys all know, kind of update where we're at as far as the couple weeks I'm going to be gone. Reminder, next week I will be here, so we will have study with me next week. The following 2 weeks, the plan is to have service and to have somebody covering the services. I know one of those 2 weeks, I'm not sure the other one, but currently the plan is for both. So if you guys could just do me a favor and just make sure to check the bulletin and make sure everything's kind of proceeding as normal, that would be great. But the plan is both, will be on both weeks. Having said that, why don't we go ahead and pray. God, again, we thank you, recognizing your goodness to us, Lord, the fact that we live in a land where we can speak freely your word, where we can gather and worship without fear of government reprisal or anything like that, that we can have the leisure that we have to just be able to take an evening away and to get together with brothers and sisters and share a time of fellowship, share a time of study, share a time prayerfully moving in your Holy Spirit, and share a time in communion. We're thankful for that, God. And we just pray as we do open your word that you would do what you do for your church. Your word tells us to preach the word, to preach it. And so we pray that as we preach it and as we study it and as we receive it, God, that it would be transformative in our hearts. Lord, change us, make us who you want us to be. We ask this in your son's name. Amen. So I got a big chapter here to try to cover. So what I'm going to do is I have a lot of things to say on it. I'm going to kind of move through the chapter, not super quickly, but as quickly as I can. And my hope is to kind of make a couple of more lengthy comments afterwards. But for the time being, we're going to be kind of moving in, and not like I normally do, going to do much of review, okay? Because we got a lot to talk about. So chapter 25, chapter 25, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field, nor prune your vineyard. What grows of its own accord of your harvest, you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is a year of rest for the land. And the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you, your male and female servants, your hired man, the stranger who dwells with you, for the livestock and the beasts that are in your land. All its produce shall be for food." So here we're given the rule of the Sabbaths. The rule of the Sabbaths for the land. So just as he had laid out in the 10 Commandments, the fact that his people are to work 6 days and then take a day of rest, so too he gives the law that his people, once they come into the land that he has promised to them. So just to make this clear, this is not going to be happening when Moses is around. It's not going to be happening while they're wandering in the wilderness. It is once they have been led into the promised land that he has given them, once they take up their permanent residencies, once they dwell on land that he has set aside for them, then they have a rule that they need to apply to the land just like they apply to themselves. And this rule, of course, is rooted in the history. It is rooted in the fact that God created the world in 6 days. 6 becomes the number, the idea of completion. And then after the completed work, you have a 7th day, the day on which God rested. That is a principle that he holds for his people on a weekly basis. You work 6 days, you rest on the 7th. We've talked extensively about that, so I'm not going to go too much back into that. But here he says this is also true for the land, and he just takes the same principle and expands it out to 6 years of work and the 7th year of rest. Now, when he says 6 years of work, what he means is for 6 years, you're going to follow the rhythms that I was talking to you about for a couple of weeks there, the rhythms of sowing, planting, and reaping. And you go through those rhythms, you work the land diligently, you receive the produce that it gives you. But in the 7th year, you are not going to do that rhythm. In the 7th year, you are not going to plant anything, and you are not going to reap a harvest from anything that you specifically planted. So the land is going to have a rest because it will not be in the process of being tilled and basically forced to bring forth its fruit. Now, will things grow naturally in that year? Yes, the land will still yield produce, but it cannot come from your hand of labor. It must come naturally from the land as the Lord directs it, okay? And so the thing I want to kind of remind you of here is that this doesn't just apply to the land, it also applies to everybody who takes part in this. What this means is that the individuals who are working 6 days and every seventh day get a day off, they also are going to get a year off of sowing and reaping. Now, please don't get me wrong. This does not mean that they will do no work of any kind. That is not the case. Humans still will have responsibilities. They still will have to do things. They'll still have to go out and pick fruit. They'll still have to go out and get like goods, like things that grow naturally and bring it in. There will be work for them to do. But what this means is that the labor that they would normally set aside and give themselves to, because most of these people will be farmers, that labor is going to look very different. And for the most part, they're going to kind of have a year off. They're going to have a sabbatical, which, of course, you guys know that word sabbatical. The word sabbatical comes from the term Sabbath. It's the idea that you're going to take a period of time off and not work for that period of time. So they get a year off, which is pretty remarkable, right? Now, with this, I want you guys to understand that there is a natural reason behind it. And although I would venture to say probably most of you, many of you, do not have experience farming, you are not maybe naturally farmers, although maybe some of you are. I would think, I learned it in school, you've learned at least enough to know that the land actually needs to not grow things every year. Like, this is actually something that is just a natural truth. Like, the reality is if you're tilling the land, if you're sowing seed, and if you're reaping a harvest regularly, you will deplete the land of the minerals that give life to the things you grow. You will make the land barren, and you will not be able to grow things on it. The land will become worthless for bringing produce. You have to give the land rest. Now, of course, we geniuses in the 21st century, and of course we figured this out a long time before the 21st century. We've been doing it for a very long time. We learned a way to circumvent this whole process, right? We learned how we could give the land rest and still grow things all the time. What you guys all know what we call this? Crop rotation, right? What we have learned is to take our fields, divide them into fourths or whatever number you want to bring it into, and then on a rotation basis, you give rest to one part of the field. So every year, 1/4 of the field will rest. It will lie fallow, meaning you're not digging up the soil, you're not tilling it, you're not dropping seed, and you're not reaping from it. And then the other 3 will be useful for produce. So we understand the land has to be fallow. It has to at times not work, or else you will destroy it. And here we have a wonderful metaphor that we need to always embrace and understand. That is that if you work without rest, you will also destroy yourself, right? And this is important because, of course, again, it's one, I think it's partly human nature. 2, our society has definitely incentivized this idea that we must work kind of to the extent of our being, because by working more, we will ultimately kind of, succeed over the other guy, or we need to do it to be able to be the successes in life that we want. I go to a school, or I teach at a school that's a private school. And as a private school, all of the students who come basically are like, they have to pay. Well, they don't personally pay, but their parents pay. Now, what I want you guys to understand is what this automatically means for the families that come to our school. This automatically means that the families are more incentivized to try to make sure that their kids are working hard. As opposed to in a public school where everybody gets to go and where a lot of people aren't paying, and thus they don't have the natural buy-in. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying this is always true. I'm just saying that in a public school, you are not necessarily going to have the same percentage of families who have the buy-in. And understand what comes along with this. What comes along with this is that oftentimes, or I should say, it's common in our school that a lot of kids will be very overachieving. Also, I need to be careful and point out that is not always the case. But they're going to be very overachieving, and they're going to be the kids that might come to mind if you think about the ones who are getting straight A's, the ones who have learned piano and are playing piano, the ones who play 3 sports over the course of the year, the ones who are involved in mock trial. Like, you understand there are some people who do everything. And in the midst of that doing everything, I mean, I can't tell you how many kids I'll talk to where they just do not have leisure. They do not have rest. They work until it's night. They'll be at a basketball game. They'll come home at 10 o'clock. They have to do their homework, and then they'll get up. By the way, in the public school, you have this as well, because you definitely have overachievers in public school too. And so I say all this because I want you guys to understand that there is built into us this idea that working hard is essentially the answer to getting success and becoming what you need to be. And you have to understand that what God is saying here is he's saying, let the land go, like work it for 6 years and then give it a rest. And think about how difficult and how scary that would be. At this point, you're essentially saying, do not plant anything. And then you are going to have to reckon with the reality that maybe there won't be any crops, which means maybe you'll have nothing to live off of. Do you guys understand? See, this principle was at play with the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath. It's just not nearly as severe. We all know you can take a day off and be fine. We know this because we take 2.5. I say 2.5. I mean, we typically work Friday, but doesn't it feel like a half? Like Friday, I mean, I would venture to say that Friday is not only a half a day off, in my experience, both with myself and often my students, and it's very easy to slack on Friday, right? It's very easy to work half-heartedly on Friday. For sure, for me, Thursday is the beginning of my weekend, Thursday night, for sure. Okay, this is actually really bad. To be honest, tonight is my Friday. And the reason is because Wednesday is my longest day. I teach more classes today than any other day, and then I come here and teach at night. And when I'm done, I'm like, whoo, all the hardest stuff is done. Thursday's my easiest day. I'm done teaching classes at 11:20. I have one tutorial after that. And it's like, oh man, it's really nice. That means I can just kind of like read or do something at work, and it's just really sweet. But then there's a bump on Friday, because Friday's actually twice as long as Thursday, and it's actually a bit of a longer day. So there's a little bit of a hiatus in there. But I say all this because I want you to understand, Thursday's like Wednesday night kind of feels like a weekend to me, and I get lots of days off, and I exploit that time off, as I think most people do. So we understand you can take a day off and live, but taking a year off and living, that's a different thing. That would require a whole, well, we'll get to that. I'll come back to this. Now he's going to move on to a second thing. I'm going to come back to the Sabbaths, because it's going to come back up in this chapter. But I want to move on to a second thing, which is an expansion of this principle of the 7-year Sabbaths. He says, you shall count seven Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. So he says, now, take these 7-year cycles and take 7 of them. Every 7th year of these 7-year cycles is going to be a Sabbath year. But you get to the 49th year as you head into the 50th, and it's going to be a special, like 7 to the 7th power special kind of year. It's going to be the ultimate Sabbath year. It will be a year in which you do not work, or coming in off the end of it. Actually, I do believe the way this works, and it doesn't specify this, but I do believe the way it works is the Sabbath is actually the 79th year, or sorry, not 79th year, the 49th year. You move through that whole year where the land is not working. At the completion of that, you then employ the principles we're about to read. This is the year of Jubilee, verse 8. So you do that, continue on in verse 8. And the time of the verse 9. Then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound. By the way, Jubilee just basically means, yay! Whoopee! Yay! Jubilee. It's like excitement, happy, joy. To sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. So we've talked about the Day of Atonement, that most holy day in Israel's history. And on that day, the day in which Israel's sins are forgiven. This is important. The day on which they commemorate the forgiveness of their sins. the Jubilee is called. You shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land. Just so you guys know, that's not saying you will blow one trumpet and it will be heard all over Israel. What he means is all over Israel, people will be blowing the trumpet. And you shall consecrate the 50th year, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. Now here I need to explain what that means, because you might be like, now I gotta be honest, this is kind of a weird verse as it stands. If you don't know the context and what is written elsewhere, it might not actually make sense. What does it mean, you shall return to your land, and you shall return to your family? Here you need to understand a principle that is not made explicit here, but is made explicit elsewhere in Scripture. That principle is this, that when Joshua, because you all know Moses is, sorry for the spoiler, he's not gonna lead the children of Israel into the promised land. You all know that. When they get there, Joshua is going to apportion the land that they take and give it to the 12 tribes of Israel. The land will be apportioned by tribe. That is, certain sections of the land will go to the tribe. So the tribe of Judah, for instance, will get a section of the land. The tribe of Ephraim will get another. The tribe of Manasseh will get another. And this will, the boundaries of that tribe will belong to that tribe. And then within the tribe, the land is going to be further divided into clans, which would be the next rank down. So you now take the several clans of the tribe and you divide the land up from the one tribe into the many clans. And then within the clans, they will be divided amongst the families. You all with me on this? So that every family has a plot of land. I want you to understand, if I live in Judah, that means I am a Jew. Now, by the way, the word Jew would have technically really applied to those who descended from Judah, not to all of Israel at the time. Now it is synonymous with Israel. But at the time, a Jew would have been somebody who's descended from the tribe of Judah. An Israelite would be from the whole territory. There's a reason why this happens. I don't need to go into it now. But if I'm a Jew, I live in the land of Judah. And what land do I own? I own land that my family was apportioned by Joshua, which is land that belonged to our larger clan within the tribe of Judah. You all kind of understand the concept. Well, here's the thing. Israel is going to buy, sell, and trade. And what is the most valuable thing you can trade? Or historically, most of the time. Nowadays, it's really weird stuff that would have very much confused the ancients. Oh, I can sell you things that don't exist, that are out in the ether, but they're worth a whole heck of a lot of money. But what is the most valuable thing throughout most of human history that you could trade? Land. Land is the most valuable thing. And Israelites would trade in land. They would sell their land. So understand, they would sell their land the same way anybody today might sell his land. He might, as a farmer, decide he's gonna give up farming. He's gonna buy a house in the city. He's gonna either retire or maybe move on to some particular job, and he's gonna sell the land. Who does he sell it to, incidentally? Typically, a big landowner. That is somebody who is trying to get lots of pieces of land so he can create massive farms so that he can get produce that he not only would use for himself, but that he'll be able to send to market and sell. By the way, that is still fundamentally true today. I'm betraying a little bit of my background in terms of the music that I grew up listening to, but one of my favorite songs growing up is a song by the country band Sawyer Brown called The Cafe on the Corner. And The Cafe on the Corner is a song about this cafe where all these farmers who have lost their farms are sitting and talking about how great it used to be when they were farmers, and now they work at the local store of some kind, you know, just like they're just checkers and things of that nature. And it's honestly a song of lament. It's how sad it is that we've lost our farms and that this is the world that we now live in. We don't know how to exist in this world. I only mention this to say this is universal in human experience. People own land. Land is like the best thing. Land does something to you. I've mentioned this before. Forgive me for saying it again. When I bought my first house, which is a very small house on a very small piece of land, 925 square feet is my house. The land's a little bigger, not like huge, I don't remember what it is. It's like 1/18 of an acre or something, which is still pretty big. And I remember the moment I walked in, that feeling of it's mine. It's a very powerful feeling. I was, 40 something years old, had never owned a house. And the thought that it's mine made it feel so different from the way everything I'd ever lived on before. Now, this is the human experience. Everybody has this. But sometimes you have to sell your land. You have to sell your land for a million reasons. And so what happens when these guys sell their land is they move off the land. They go elsewhere. So what is the Jubilee year doing? And what is he saying here when he says, it shall be a Jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. What is he saying? What he's saying is, after 50 years, and by the way, please understand this, not 50 years after you sell it. It's when that 50th year happens, that is the 50th year from the last Jubilee, then that land you sold will revert back to you. It will become yours again. So here's the thing. If you sell the land in the 49th year to somebody, that person will own it till when? Or for how long? 1 year. If you sell it on the 45th year, they'll own it for 5 years. If you sell it in the first year, they will own it for 49 years. But here's the thing I want you guys to understand is the main impetus through this. I'm going to go on and hopefully we'll get a chance to get to it. We'll talk about some of the reasoning behind all of this. But let me give you the base reason. The base reason is this. The land of Israel belongs to the children of Israel. And the portions of the land of Israel, that is, the tribal sections, belong to the tribes of the people of Israel. And the land of the clans and the land of the families belong to those families. God is essentially saying here, and he'll say it again elsewhere, we'll see it, that this land belongs to you and to your families forever, and nothing can change that. You might lose it for a minute, but you're going to get it back. You're going to get it back. That's the main reason behind it. But I'm going to talk about why it's kind of a brilliant move. There's more to the Jubilee year, though. That 50th year shall be a Jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine. For it is the Jubilee. So again, it's a Sabbath year. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat its produce from the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his possession. And if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor's hand, you shall not oppress one another. So here, just so you guys know, when he says you shall not oppress one another, oppress is a vague word. It can mean lots of things. And oppression can sound super bad, and it is. But really, what he's saying here when he says you shall not oppress one another is he's saying you are not going to be able to take the land of your brother and keep it. That would be an act of oppression. This is your brother's land. He will always ultimately come back to it. So there is some sense in which when you buy that land, you can use it. It's like it's renting it, but it always goes back to your brother. You cannot oppress your brother. Now, here's where he's going to say what I already just told you. I probably should have explained this after we read it, but I'll repeat myself. Verse 15, according to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy from your neighbor, and according to the number of years of crops, he shall sell to you. According to the multitude of years, you shall increase its price. According to the fewer number of years, you shall diminish its price. For he sells to you according to the number of years of the crops. So I hope that made sense based on what I said before. What he's saying there, when he says the number of years, he's saying, depending on how close you are to the Jubilee year, that's how much you're going to have to pay. So if you're 49 years from the Jubilee year, which by the way would have been possible. I mean, you could easily envision a family just falling on really hard times, no crops. They're in a place where they cannot buy seed to plant their field. They have to leave. And their neighbor says, I will buy it from you. If in the 49th year, your neighbor buys it from you, he is essentially paying you the rent, because that's what this means, is it essentially means no Israelite is buying any land. They're renting it all. He will pay you the rent for 49 years. That's what he owes you, which would be way more expensive than if you bought that or if you sold him that land in the 45th year when there's only 5 years left, right? And by the way, this will incentivize people to behave accordingly. People are going to be less likely to buy land when there's only 1 year left. It just won't be worth it necessarily. They'll only do it if they find themselves in desperate need of having an additional field for that 1 year. That's essentially the idea behind it. Now look at verse 17. Therefore, you shall not oppress one another. Please understand what he's saying here by oppress. This is a very important kind of point. What he's saying is you're not going to take your land from your neighbor in such a way to where it's going to drive him into homelessness. That's essentially what he's saying. And here I want to highlight something, guys, that I said I was going to wait till the end. I'm going to say this right now because actually this is kind of the perfect place to describe this. I want you to understand how genius what God is doing here is in a practical sense. just how brilliant this maneuver is. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a discursive discourse about capitalism and communism. Is that okay? And then I'm going to make my point. First of all, I teach these all the time. In fact, I've been teaching the communist revolution the Bolshevik revolution for the last couple of weeks. So it's pretty fresh in my mind because I've had to teach pretty detailed kind of explanation of what it was Marx taught. So Karl Marx, who was German, by the way, not Russian. Lots of people get this wrong. He was German, 19th century. He actually did not take part in the Bolshevik Revolution. He was dead before the Russian Revolution, which brought about the Soviet Union, existed. What I want you to understand is he was an ideologue. And what I mean by that is he had a vision of the way the world should be. And that vision was a world in which, and here's the thing, it actually I'm not going to go into a lot of details of what he taught. I'm going to highlight just a couple things. One aspect, depending on how you describe this vision, it actually sounds really good. He envisioned a world in which there was no private property and in which everybody shared all things in common, in which the community functioned for the benefit of the community. A lot of people get this wrong. They think that what he envisioned was a totalitarian state in which you had an individual oppressing everybody. And his vision was the opposite to a degree, in a certain way. His vision was, let's share everything and let's work together as a community and work cooperatively rather than competitively. That was his vision. Now again, I don't have time to go into all the details, but let me explain one place where he went horribly wrong. And that one place is that as he describes the way he's going to reach this vision, he makes the point that of course there are going to be people who are not going to be on board. What do you do with these people? And his answer is, you either re-educate them, that is, you teach them. By the way, he was an advocate for, to whatever degree you can, let's try to do this nicely, show them how good communism is, all that kind of stuff. But as he would always say, he's like, I'm not a utopian. I know how people are. He goes, some people just will not believe it. So what do? You try to re-educate them. That does mean you can use force. And if even after using force in re-education, they still won't listen to you, what do you do with them? You kill them. And his idea, and the way he would have said it is, you kill everybody who won't get on board. If they don't get on board, then all they're doing is they're preventing us from getting to this harmonious, beautiful state. He believed, by the way, that it was good and that this is what was best for humankind. This was the best. That was his belief. That was his conviction. By the way, I probably shouldn't say this because I'm tangenting and I have too much stuff to talk about, but I'm going to anyway. He had a best friend, a really close friend, a guy who was Russian, who disagreed with him. And what this guy believed was, we have the same vision. At the end of it all, we are going to, his name was, by the way, Mikhail Bakunin. At the end of it all, we are going to come to this communist state where we share all things in common. But he said to Marx, he goes, Karl, you can't kill people to get there. And he goes, how does that make us any better than the guys we're opposed to right now? And Karl's like, you're a utopian, you're a fool, you don't understand that we have to actually spill blood to be able to get to where we're supposed to go. Bakunin and Marx at that point split. Bakunin became the father of the anarchists, who, if you really think of anybody who's pie in the sky, it's anarchists, right? They believe it's all gonna work out without any government. And if you look at the communists, you have the totalitarians who rounded up large numbers of people and killed them. And by the way, if somebody ever sits there and says, well, Stalin and Mao are not, Marx wouldn't have agreed with them, he would have disagreed with them, and so they're not really expressing Marx's view. To some degree, that is right in lots of ways. But let me tell you one place that definitely Marx agrees with them. They all three agree, you kill all the people who don't fall in line. They do agree with that, okay? Here's why I say all of this. Communism, as Marx presented it, which, by the way, you guys all know Marx didn't invent communism. Communism as an idea has always existed, and different societies have tried it, including the early church in the book of Acts. They didn't try it at a governmental level, they tried it at a church level. And guess what? It always doesn't work, and that it doesn't work for the reason that Marx actually told Bakunin, which is you can't make people do this. Marx said you have to make people do this, but his point is you can only do this by making them do it. In other words, they don't just voluntarily do it. Marx came up with a whole bunch of different components that made it what it is. But my key point here, Marx is an ideologue. That is, he has an ideology. He believes it, He teaches it. He calls people who agree with him brother. He says, join with me in my fight for this thing. Now let me contrast him with Adam Smith, who is considered the father of capitalism, which, by the way, is actually a misnomer. Because here's the thing. If you read Adam Smith and you look at Adam Smith, and I'm not just saying this because I like him better, which I do by a lot. Adam Smith is not an ideologue. It's funny because today, I'm sure you guys have all noticed that people are getting more and more like angry at capitalism and are talking about like bringing it down and how capitalism is the great evil in the world. They speak of it in the same way that like capitalists speak of communists, as if it's an ideology. Adam Smith was not an ideologue. He did not have an ideology. If you read his book, The Wealth of Nations, he did not present capitalism as a thing where he's like, hey guys, we should all be capitalists. He's presenting it as an observation. He's saying this is actually how the world is. He's not saying we all need to be this way. He's saying, let's be real. This is the way the world is. For good and for bad, this is the way the world is. And he actually had one argument that he was making because, of course, Marxism did not exist when Adam Smith wrote. He wrote a solid, I want to say 60 years before Marx was around writing. He was not writing to try to convince everybody to become capitalists against communists. He was actually writing because of the prevailing economic theory that most kings had at the day, which all the kings were worried about their sum total of wealth in their country, and they were worried about letting their wealth outside of the country. So to avoid their wealth leaving the country, like almost every king in the 18th century, 1700s, had what's called a mercantilist system where they used lots of tariffs. So if you read The Wealth of Nations, what he's arguing against is actually against tariffs. That's the one argument he has. And he's making that argument because he's saying, kings, you don't understand, when you're taxing it, what you're doing is you're not recognizing that although we may lose cash, we're getting goods in the country. There is a net positive. But much of the book is just him arguing about how humans behave. And he essentially says, the reality is that we are selfish. And he says this, again, for good and bad. We are motivated first and foremost, above all, by self-interest. We are going to first and foremost work hard to survive. And because of that, we are going to be incentivized to work hard. One of the big problems with the Marxist systems that set up is people were not incentivized to work hard because they were taken care of regardless of whether they worked hard. Which incidentally, that right there is the kind of thing where Adam Smith would go, see, that's capitalism. He's like, I don't need to tell you to be capitalist. That's just what they do. When you just give people money, they stop working. And so here's the thing that he's saying. He comes through and he basically is saying, as much as possible, we need to try to not intervene in the market. Let the market play out itself because people's own self-interest, creating competition, is what's best in most instances in the market. Now, sorry for the economics lesson. I say all of this because I do want to highlight something that is true. First of all, in general, most societies, like capitalist principles, were very much at play. And in many societies, long before Adam Smith was born, you had very distinctly capitalist societies. Britain, when Adam Smith started writing, was already capitalist. He was watching what was happening in his home country and was writing about it. So here's why I say all of this. Self-interest makes us try to survive, and it also makes it such that we try to make more money if we can. So if you own land and you are powerful enough and have the money to do it, you're going to add more land if you can, right? Well, how much land are you going to add? Well, you're going to add as much as you can. Well, at some point, if you take up all the land, and this will actually, or can actually work out this way, then you will create a situation in which people will not be able to have a place to live because the land will all be taken. Because think about this. If I own all the land, I can charge it to the people, or I can charge rent to the people who will pay me the most money. My concern is not going to be to make sure that everybody has a place to live. My concern is going to be to make sure that I'm getting the most money that I can. Now, have you guys heard anybody kind of complaining? I had to think about this a lot. Complaining recently about the increasing wage gap in America. You guys heard people complain about that? It's a common thing being talked about online, which you shouldn't be online anyway, so I would encourage you to not worry about it. But it's a common thing that people bring up, the wage gap. What they mean by this is that the uppermost crest of society is getting kind of insanely wealthy, at levels that are hard to fathom. And the lower crest is getting poorer. And that in the middle, and this is the big thing, that what has traditionally been the middle class is starting to drop into the lower class. Now, when I first heard people arguing about this, I was like, this is nonsense. Like, this is not the way it works. What has been happening is we've been so ultra-capitalist that really tons of wealth has been coming in, which is one of the products of a free market. Tons of wealth has been coming in, and standard of living is up for everybody. And that is true to a degree. But as I reflected on it, I realized something. If you go back to ancient Rome, they more or less had a capitalist economy. And what I'm describing to you right now is what happened. The nobles who owned large swaths of land were getting wealthier and wealthier, and their land was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what was happening is all the people, because they were becoming too poor, they had to go into the cities. They had to live in the cities. And in the cities, they were taken care of as long as there weren't too many people. But then when there were too many people, they weren't being taken care of. And what ended up happening, and this is what led to the Middle Ages, is people found themselves in a situation where they had no way to live. And they couldn't rent from a landlord because they didn't make the money to live. So what they did is they sold themselves, and they thus became serfs in the land. So they became slaves. A serf is a slave. They were then given a piece of land. They were expected to work that land, but the land belonged to the Lord, and they would pay the money up. And here's the thing. What I started to realize is that this is something, I'm not saying it is going to happen in America. I'm saying I can see movements towards that right now. I can see movements because I'm watching because I'm a teacher, I'm watching as kids graduate high school and graduate college and have decent jobs. Like, these are kids with good jobs. They're not able to buy a house, and they're not even able to rent a house, or if they can rent an apartment, it takes up an enormous part of their money. So I have friends, I have a couple of good friends who are former students of mine who are married to each other, who have 2 roommates. So what's happening is increasingly people are having to live with their parents, or they're having to take on roommates even if they have a family. And that's because the costs are just becoming too much. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens, but a big part of it is, it's not the only part of it. One thing, there's so many things I could talk about, I don't have time. I don't want you guys to think in your mind it's just rich people being evil. There are a million things that lead to this, but one thing that I do want you guys to understand is it is human nature that you are going to expand your wealth. You always do. And generally speaking, by the way, just as an aside, if you don't do that, then you will eventually lose it. It's actually in your self-interest to do it. So why do I say all of that? I say all of that because what is the Jubilee year that he's talking about? What's it for? It's to prevent that. The Jubilee year was actually imposed because ancient Israel, people say ancient Israel was capitalist. It was capitalist, but it also had, like any society, there is no society that has ever existed that is just pure capitalist that I'm aware of. They all are, like for right now, America, England, France, we're all capitalist to differing degrees. We're more so than France and England. Other countries are more so than us. We all have largely a free market, but there are things that try to squeeze the market a little bit because we don't want these things happening, right? Because the market can go to bad places, right? A great example, by the way, of how a free market can go to a bad place, just observe the things that are in a black market. Black markets function according to the principles of capitalism. If there's demand and somebody willing to pay it, it'll exist, right? So all this to say, what's the goal? It's not just about the fact that God made a promise to these Israelite families and said, you're gonna hold your land. He is saying, I'm good with you guys making money. I'm good with you guys becoming successful. I'm good with you guys making land, employing people, building up your economy. I'm good with all that. But there's going to come a point at which it could be bad. I don't want, because what would have eventually happened is the Israelites to become slaves for giant landlords who keep bringing all the land back. Does that make sense? He's essentially saying, become rich, get big land, but at the end of 50 years, it goes back. It goes back to the family, they're able to redeem it, and they're able to use it again. And please, guys, understand what this means. Like, you can become pretty wealthy in that time. It's 50 years. People weren't living a lot more than 50 years. So over the course of that 50 years, a person could become quite wealthy in land. And over that 50 years, a person could become quite poor in that process. But it was a way of re-squaring the account. Now, can I just say really quickly, I am not here saying that this is the best way to do it or it's something we should do. I'm trying to point out how God thought of a way, kind of brilliantly, to establish a system that would maintain or protect people from oppression. Because when people are serfs on manors with large landlords, they are slaves. And if you are slaves, then you are oppressed, right? So he's finding a way to handle that. And it's a check. It's a thing on there to prevent this big gap from appearing. Okay, having said that, let's move on, verse 18. So you shall observe my statutes and keep my judgments and perform them. You will dwell in the land in safety, meaning when you do this, you will have a thriving, good land. You guys understand? Like, if you observe the 7th year Sabbath, and if you observe the year of Jubilee, then I'm going to bless your land. And you might sit there and say to yourself, but taking a year off is not good. Taking a year off will lead to me not being successful. Returning land to people to whom it once belonged is not good for me. It will make me not successful. What is God saying? He's saying, try me out in this. If you do it, I will bless. You will be blessed. Your neighbors will be blessed. It will be good for everyone. And I want you guys to think about this. Just think about even and I do speak as somebody who I do think capitalism is generally a good thing. I think it is something that needs checks. I definitely am glad my country is more capitalist. I actually think my country should be a bit more capitalist. But I definitely also recognize that there are bad things in capitalism. And that there are impulses in capitalism, which is human nature, that we need to work against. Let me just give you an example. Giving to the poor is always a nonsensical idea within capitalism. Capitalism says do what is going to be in your best interest. Giving away money to other people doesn't make any sense. So it's a good kind of check. So what he's saying here is he's saying, do these things that actually don't make sense. Do these things that go against human nature. Do these things that actually, from your perspective, is not actually going to make you more successful. And I'm going to bless you. Do these things and I will bless you. Look on, verse 20. If you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year, since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce? We take a year off. What if we don't eat? What are we going to do? Then I will command my blessing on you. Listen to that. I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, and it will bring forth produce enough for 3 years. I will make the land grow. I will make the land grow, and you will have so much that you will be able to live for the following 3 years, but you have to trust me. And here we come to this enormous thing that undergirds the entirety of the notion of the Sabbath. We talked about this back when we first read about the first Sabbath breaker in the book of Exodus. The reality is that it doesn't make sense for us to take time off. We will do better if we just work the extra time. And what God is saying is, I get that makes sense. Take the day off, don't work, and trust that I'm going to bless you for it. Take the day off, don't work, trust that I'm going to bless you for it. He says, I will command my blessing. Verse 22, and you shall sow in the 8th year, and you shall eat old produce until the 9th year. You're going to have so much that you're going to be literally eating produce from previous years. Until its produce comes in, you shall eat of the old harvest. And with this, I want you to just turn to a couple of passages. Turn to Matthew 6. Matthew 6, look at verse 25. The principle that Jesus is instructing his followers in here is the exact one that God is trying to test Israel with. Verse 25 of chapter 6, therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? So why do you worry about clothes? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is today here and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Look at the birds. Are they not fed? Look at the foxes. Are they not fed? Look at the antelope. Are they not fed? Look at every living creature. Does God not take care of them? If God does not take care of them, will he not also take care of you? Trust that he's going to provide for you. Verse 31, therefore do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? After these things the Gentiles seek. Your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. Instead, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. He's saying, don't fret. Is God real? Yes. Does he love you? Yes. Will he take care of you? Yes. Look at the world as proof. God takes care of his creatures. Don't fear. Do what he tells you to do, and he will provide. Now, by the way, having said this, I'm not saying that there won't be hard times. As we all know, you can look at the world and you can see that sometimes foxes go a little hungry. And sometimes there's a little bit more work that needs to be done for these creatures to live. And one of the things I think about, I always think about 1 Timothy 6:8. You don't need to turn there. Paul says this. Actually, yeah, Paul says this. He says, but with these things we shall be content if we have food and clothes. I had a student years ago in the school ministry when I used to oversee the school ministry, and I remember him kind of in a time of sharing, he goes, yeah, I read this verse, and he goes, I was just kind of sad. And I go, why is that? And he goes, God sets the bar so low. He says, food and clothes will be content. Well, he doesn't even promise a shelter. Like, that's it. We'll be content with food and clothes. The principle is trust God that he's going to take care of you. That's the principle. And that's what God is testing people in the Sabbath day. It's what he's testing people in the Sabbath year. It's not only a rest, it's a test. It's a rest for you, and it's a test to see if you'll be faithful to do the things he's called you to do. Verse 23, the land shall not be sold permanently. And this is the crux of it. For the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. And in all the land of your possession, you shall grant redemption of the land. Meaning, if you buy land from somebody, you will grant redemption of that land, meaning they or their family members will be able to buy it back. If one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold some of his possession, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it. Now let me pause here. The redeeming relative, who is referred to in the book of Ruth as the kinsman redeemer, if you guys are familiar with that line, the redeeming relative is a person of close relationship who, because he's in your family, he has the right to buy back your land to keep it in the family. That's who the redeeming relative is. So if you become so poor that you have to sell land, the redeeming relative can come and buy it back. Continuing on, verse 26, or if the man has no one to redeem it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since its sale and restore the remainder to the man to whom he sold it, that he may return his possession. He actually doesn't even have to wait till the year Jubilee. Doesn't need to wait till the 50th year. If he all of a sudden comes into money, and that money is the difference of the remaining years for the value of the land, he goes back to the guy who sold it to him, and that guy is expected to sell him the land back, because at the end of the day, it's his. This land belongs to you forever. This is not just true of Israel as a nation. It is true of the people of Israel within the nation. But if he is not able to have it restored to himself, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Jubilee. And in the Jubilee it shall be released, and he shall return to his possession. So if he can't buy it back, he just has to wait till Jubilee. It will come back to him. Verse 29. Now here's going to be this is going to be quick. It's just a couple of ways the rule applies out, not counting farms. Verse 29. If a man sells a house in a walled city, this is different, because there are going to be cities in Israel. And by the way, what made a city in ancient Israel, it's much more confusing now. Now when we think of a city as opposed to a town, we're usually thinking population. But back then, what made a city versus a town or a village is a city had a wall around it. Which, by the way, did that mean it had a larger population? Yes. But the wall is what made it a city. So, if a man sells a house in a walled city, he may redeem it within a whole year after it is sold. Within a full year, he may redeem it. He can buy it back in a year. But if it is not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to him who bought it throughout his generations. So understand, this promise of the land is still tied to God's understanding of how promise goes to the promise of land goes to the people. In a city, they don't own land. It's a habitation. Again, trying to keep people from becoming too poor and destitute. If they become so poor they have to sell their home in a walled city, they can buy it back in a year. But at the end of that year, the person who bought it, it's theirs. So buying in a city actually makes it yours. Continue on. However, the houses of villages which have no wall around them shall be counted as the fields of the country. So if you're in a village, that will actually still hold in the same way that a country estate would. They may be redeemed and they shall be released in the Jubilee. So somebody can buy them back, and in the 50th year they will go back. Nevertheless, the cities of the Levites and the houses and the cities of their possession, the Levites may redeem at any time. You guys remember the Levites? This is Moses' tribe. This is the tribe that Aaron belongs to. They do not get any land in the country. There is no tribe of Levi in terms of location. What they get is cities. So they live in cities. So what he's saying here is a Levite, if he has to sell his house, he can always redeem it. He always gets it back if he can pay for it. And this will always hold true because the Levites, their possession is the city. So they have to be in the city. Verse 33, and if a man purchases a house from the Levites, then the house was sold in the city of his possession, shall be released in the Jubilee. The Levites will get it back in the Jubilee. For the houses in the cities of the Levites are their possession amongst the children of Israel. But the field of the common land of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. Now guys, here's what I really want you to understand. All of this is ultimately going to try to protect people and prevent them from becoming too poor. That's the idea. It's trying to say, look, we want to protect people from becoming too impoverished. Look at verse 35. If one of your brethren, this is an Israelite, one of your brethren becomes poor and falls into poverty amongst you, then you shall help him like a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. This is something that he's saying, like, you can do this with strangers and sojourners, meaning foreigners, people who come in. However, so it's like, if you see a poor person and you decide to help him, you can loan him money, but you will take no usury or interest from him. So if you give him money as help, you can ask him to pay you back. You're not going to charge him interest. You're not going to make money off of your brother. Fear your God that your brother may live with you. You shall not lend him your money for usury, nor lend him your food at profit. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you to the land of Canaan and to be your God. Please note, understand what's in the backdrop of what he's saying. I brought you out of the land of Egypt. What happened in Egypt? We were slaves. He's trying to warn you. Don't put yourself back in the situation you were in then. Verse 39, if one of your brethren who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave. Now, guys, this is the thing I want you to understand. Throughout most of human history, in most places, let me actually put it this way. All humans at all times have taken on debt. And often when humans take on debt, they reach a point where they cannot pay it back. Do you guys understand? Can't do it. They will have no income coming in. This is human nature. When I was in high school, my mom didn't sign me up for free lunches. So I would show up at school having forgotten to make a lunch, and I would ask my friends, hey, could I borrow a couple bucks to get lunch? I had no income. I had no job. My mom never promised me that she would give me any money to pay it back. I would say, could you loan me some money so I could get some lunch? And I remember from a young age sitting there going, man, I owe 35 bucks, which is a fortune when you have literally no way to pay it back. And you'd have friends saying, when are you going to pay me back? And it was very heavy on my head as a 35-year-old. When I got into college, I came from a poor family. I was walking through the student union building. And there are these guys here saying, do you want a Discover card? Do you want a MasterCard? Do you want a Visa card? I go, absolutely I do. And I took all three, and then actually 4 MasterCard. And then I would go, and it was like, all I have to do is run it, and I'd get money. I had no job. I wrestled at Boise State. I was going to school. No job, no income, check, well, I don't know why I'm doing this. We didn't do that. We did the, that whole thing. But I did it. And by the time I was out of college, I had $10,000 in credit card debt. And I was paying the credit card debt with other credit cards. And all 4 credit cards had a 33% APR because I hadn't always paid. That was crushing debt. When I got my first post-college job, I was paid $20,000 a year. I can't pay back $10,000 in credit card debt when there's a 33% APR. I can never pay it back, ever. This is the thing you guys need to understand. There is no way that I could have ever paid that back. And the only reason I was able to pay that back is because my employers decided that what they would do is they would pay it back for me, And then they would garnish my wage to pay back the $10,000 without interest. And I paid it back. Paid it all back in like 3 years. Paid the whole thing. Because they helped me. But I was crushed by the debt. And guys, so many people in America are in this place. And here's the thing, in America, when you're so crushed that there's no way it's gonna be taken care of, the only answer is bankruptcy, which what that means essentially is you have bad credit. And that's it. There's no other punishment we can lay at your door, which is bad. That means you can't buy a house. That's bad. Although you can actually get it cleared up relatively quickly if you're disciplined. But what it means to all your creditors, to whom you owe money, who lost money, they're not getting that money back probably. They're gonna do their best to get what they can from whoever they can, but they're not getting it back. And that is unfair, because they did give that money. And so what happened throughout most of human history is people would sell themselves into slavery because they didn't have bankruptcy. Well, they did, and it's called selling yourself into slavery. There wasn't debt forgiveness. The people you owed money to would say, we're going to get our value. And so what God is doing here is he's saying, you fall into debt, you can sell yourself into slavery, debt slavery. However, this slavery you're selling yourself into is not true slavery. So look here again, if one of your brethren becomes poor and sells himself to you, you shall not compel him to serve as a slave. As a hired servant and a sojourner, he shall be with you. And he shall serve you until the year of Jubilee. What happens in the year of Jubilee, guys? You're freed. In the year of Jubilee, your debt is forgiven. This is God's answer to the problem in this place. You can sell yourself into debt slavery. You will pay back a lot in doing so, but you will get your freedom when the Jubilee comes. So guys, I want you to think really quickly just what a rejoicing moment it would be for the Jubilee year to hit. It wasn't just that you're able to go back to your ancestral homes. All your debt is gone. One day, crushing debt, so crushing you have to go to your creditors and say, I will sell myself to you. And then the next, as soon as Jubilee hits, it's forgiven. You owe nothing. Your record is clear. You are a free man. Verse 41, and then he shall depart from you. He will no longer live with the creditor. He and his children with him. Understand this. If you sold yourself into debt slavery, you were selling your wife and children into debt slavery as well. And shall return to his own family. He'll go back to his own family. He shall return to the possession of his fathers, for they are my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as slaves. He's saying, I'm not going to let them be lifelong slaves. That's why I set them free. But you shall not rule over him. Verse 43. You shall not rule over him with rigor, but you shall fear your God. You're not going to be harsh with him. You're going to fear God. And as for your male and female slaves whom you may have from the nations that are around you, from them you may buy male and female slaves. Moreover, you may buy the children of the strangers who dwell with you and their families who are with you, which they beget in your land, and they shall become your property. And you may take them as an inheritance for your children after you to inherit them as a possession. They shall be your permanent slaves. But regarding your brethren, the children of Israel, you shall not rule over one another with rigor. Guys, for lack of time, I cannot go through and again make an explanation of why God allowed the slavery here. I have taught on that. I've taught extensively on it. So I would encourage you to go back and find. If you need, I don't remember which teaching specifically. I'd have to look it up. So if you really want to know, you can shoot me an email. Suffice it to say, please understand, like in this particular world, you didn't have the comforts, the protections of the realities of so many of the governments that exist in our world. The reality was you found yourself frequently fighting against a foreign enemy and defeating them. And in defeating that foreign enemy, all of a sudden you have these people. What are you going to do with them? What made sense to most people is they were like, we can kill them or we can actually use them for a profit. And they would. But also, can I add, a lot of these guys were debt slaves. A lot of these guys would be indebted. And that was actually these are the two most common ways people would be made slaves at this particular time. Understand that they were not engaged in slave markets. It was like the natural reality of the world that these guys lived in would result in people being slaves. And it was a common thing throughout all parts of the world. So again, I'm not trying to justify it. I just want you to understand the way that they saw the world. And hear what God is saying is he's not sitting here saying, go ahead and mistreat everybody else. In fact, if you were to go back to Exodus 22:21, he says, do not oppress the foreigners that come into your land. Treat them well. But what he's saying here is if one happens to become your slave, you can keep that one, but you cannot do it to the children of Israel. Then continuing on that last part of verse 46, but regarding your brethren, the children of Israel, you will not rule over another with rigor, meaning you're not going to rule over them forever here. Now I'm going to finish out the chapter and make some final comments. Now, if a sojourner or stranger close to you becomes rich, and one of your brethren who dwells by him becomes poor and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner close to you, or to a member of the stranger's family. So here he's saying, if you end up becoming poor and sell yourself to a foreigner, the stranger meaning a non-Israelite, after he is sold, he may be redeemed again. So please note, he's now qualifying. Although you may come to purchase a stranger, a foreigner, you will and you can become a slave to a foreigner. That's allowed. So an Israelite could be a servant to a foreigner. So understand, he's not setting up a class of Israelites are slave owners and the foreigners are not slave owners. You could be a slave owner as a foreigner, and an Israelite could belong to him. However, and how would that happen? Most likely debt. It would be debt. After he is sold, he may be redeemed. So the law of the land will apply to the foreigner. That Jewish man or his wife or children could be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him. Again, a kinsman redeemer. Or his uncle or his uncle's son may redeem him, or anyone who is near of kin to him in his family may redeem him. Or if he is able, he may redeem himself. If somehow, and this was a common thing, if somehow you became wealthy enough, you could redeem yourself. See, guys, we really don't understand slavery as it worked through most parts of human history. Not all. To be honest, American, like the chattel slavery of America that existed in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, I'm not saying it was nothing like previous iterations of slavery. It was, but there were some things very fundamentally different. But understand that generally speaking, you study Roman history, there are people who were slaves who became very powerful. You had the ability to buy your own freedom. Actually, that was true in America. That did happen, things like that. In Egypt, interestingly, there's a whole period of time in the Middle Ages where there developed a slave caste monarchy, where the kings all came from a slave caste that managed to earn their freedom. So it's a very confusing thing that we don't understand because it's an institution that doesn't exist, at least legally, anymore. And so you have to understand that when you're reading all of this. Anyway, continuing on, verse 50, thus he shall reckon with him who bought him. The price of his release shall be according to the number of years from the year that he was sold to him until the year of Jubilee. It shall be according to the time of a hired servant for him. So just like with a Jew purchasing a Jew for the Jubilee time. Now understand, this could still be a long time, right? You're freed in the Jubilee. Who knows when in the Jubilee you have been sold? Could be early in the Jubilee. It might be most of your life. But he says here, you can redeem at any time. If you have a family member with money, you can redeem him from the stranger, and in the Jubilee year, the stranger will have to set him free. Verse 51, if there are still many years remaining, according to them, he shall repay the price of his redemption from the money with which he was bought. And if there remain but a few years until the year of Jubilee, then he shall reckon with him, and according to his years, he shall repay him the price of his redemption. He shall be with him as a yearly hired servant. Remember, it's like he's a hired servant because he's going to be free. And he shall not rule with rigor over him in your sight. He cannot mistreat this person. He has to treat him like a hireling. And if he is not redeemed in these years, that is, if no family member comes and sets their family member free, then he shall be released in the year of Jubilee, he and his children with him. For the children of Israel are servants to me. They are my servants. Key thing, my servants, not anyone else's. They are my slaves, God is saying, not anyone else's. Whom I brought out of the land of Egypt, I am the Lord your God. Now, let me finish by making a couple of comments. Why I was looking forward to this chapter and why it's so important to me is because what I described to you in my experience, I understand what it's like to have a crushing debt that I think I can never pay. I understand what it's like to have somebody come in and pay it for me. And I hope you all see where I'm going, right? Understand that every step of this, like so many of the things we've looked at, is yet again something that points people to Christ. Think about it. Think about who the person is who buys back the slave, who frees the slave. It's a family member who is a kinsman redeemer. A redeemer, or somebody who redeems something, is somebody who buys something back that rightfully belongs to him. And what is Jesus? He is our kinsman redeemer. As we understand, Jesus, who is fully God, is also fully man. And because he's fully man, he is our brother. The scriptures speak of him in that way as if he is our eldest brother. He is our kinsman. And what did he do? We had been sold. That's the language the New Testament used. Paul says that we are sold in slavery to sin. That is, sin controls us, sin dominates us, and because sin controls us and dominates us, the devil has the claim to us. And death owns us. We are destined for death because sin has made us its servant, and the wages of sin is death. And there's nothing you can do to escape it. And if you really stopped and reflected on it, you would feel the same crushing burden of the piles of the weight of that sin that anyone who is in debt would feel. I think of Martin Luther, the great reformer. If you study Martin Luther's life, forgive me if you guys haven't heard of Martin Luther. He was a German reformer in the 16th century, 1500s. He started the Protestant Reformation. If you know his life, then you know he was burdened with an extremely heavy conscience, where he was so keenly aware of how sinful he was, and it absolutely ruined him psychologically. He became a monk because he felt like he needed to become a monk ultimately to free himself of the guilt of sin, because he needed to live a holy life. But as a monk, he only saw his sin ever more clearer. And in the monastery, he would he would repent and he would confess his sins to his confessor. And there are records of him confessing his sin for hours upon hours. His confessor getting exhausted, because I think you could imagine what it would feel like to have some guy constantly confessing the tiniest little sin. And his confessor would say to him, "Martin, go away and come back when you have done something worthy of confession." I'm glad you don't live with that heaviness. Or let me rephrase, maybe you do. I've met people who do. I shouldn't assume you don't. I hope you do not live with that spirit of heaviness. But let me just say this. We are far less likely today to live with that spirit of heaviness than to live with the assumption that actually everything we're doing is right. We're much more likely to go down that path. With Martin Luther, what was so profound for him is he came to understand the gospel. That he was forgiven not because of all the little things he did right, not because he did all of the acts of obedience that the church had set for him, not because he prayed enough, not because he confessed enough. It was because God wanted to forgive him and God chose to forgive him, and that when he received it by faith, it was gone. The technical term the Catholics would have used is expiated. The burden of the weight of guilt was expiated. It was done away with, which, by the way, at that time, the actual understanding that the Catholic Church had about the atonement, which Martin Luther would have learned, was what you could call the debt theory of the atonement. It was kind of proposed by Saint Anselm, who argued that God saving us from our sins is kind of like a debt. We owe him an insurmountable, unforgivable debt. And it is his grace that, what he would have also said is the superabundance of Christ's righteousness, which would pay off that debt. That we didn't have the money to pay it back, the righteousness, but Christ had so much righteousness, that righteousness paid it back. Martin Luther, when he realized that we're saved by grace through faith alone, he felt the burden gone. He felt free. Truly free. And this is something, again, you can read his own writings. You can read how he processed this stuff. It was a revelation to him. And that's one of the things I love about this, is it so clearly lays out for us the gospel. That people will live in circumstances because of debts that are so overwhelming, so burdensome. There's nothing they could ever do to pay them back, and they know it. And who's going to step in and save them? Who's going to pay them back? Not everybody's blessed to have a boss like mine who came up with an ingenious plan to help me in a righteous way pay off my debt, like without just giving it to me. Most people don't have that, the vast majority. I couldn't do it, and somebody came alongside me and did it for me. These guys can't do it, and so God gives them a kinsman redeemer to come alongside of them and do it for them. And if nobody can, don't worry, because Jubilee's a-coming. And when Jubilee comes, it is just wiped away. And all of this is meant to instill in the hearts of the Israelites who are reading it, who are reading this and hearing this idea of the forgiveness that God offers to his people and the expectation of a future kinsman redeemer who is going to come and who's going to pay off an impossible debt. And the feeling that we should have when we meditate upon this and think about it should be the same feeling that this person felt as the year of Jubilee approached. That feeling that, oh my goodness, I am free. What does Jesus say the first time he reveals himself in his hometown of Nazareth, there when he's in the synagogue with all the people? This is the first time he revealed himself, but the first time he really revealed to his friends and family, the people who grew up knowing him. First time he told them what he was there for. He reads from Isaiah 61 verses 1 and 2. What did he do? He came to set the captives free. That's what he came to do. He came to set the captives free. And that's what is offered to you. It's what is offered to me in the reality of the gospel. And it is what we are going to commemorate and rejoice in this moment as we stand to partake of communion. Let's pray. God, truly, what a great salvation you have given to us. You have bestowed in our hearts. Lord, so great a salvation, it's hard to fathom. Lord, there are not enough metaphors and analogies and allegories in the world to really convey to us the great love with which you have loved your people. And so, Lord, we just stand here before you holding these elements with thankful hearts for the debt that has been wiped out, thankful hearts for the freedom that you have gained us, thankful hearts for the recognition that we now are rejoined with our Father. We were separated and slaves, but now we are back with our Father, and that we now truly have a land waiting for us, our rightful possession, a land which was taken from us, but which we will inhabit again. And Father, it's all because of Jesus, and it's all because of what he did. And so we hold these elements remembering what he did, and we partake of them celebrating what he did, thanking him for what he did. We do this as we take this bread and drink this cup. In Jesus' holy name. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. God bless you guys. I'll be back next week. The 2 weeks after that, we'll still have a service, but I won't be here just so you guys know I'll be in Europe. All right. See you guys next week.